now that we've gone through some of the transcript of the Brendan Dassey initial statement to police, I just wanted to take a minute and sort of talk about a few things with regards to this whole statement. Now, excuse me. I record these videos in between, running after kids and doing chores. So it's really the only time that I get to sit down and have a smoke. But I wanted to sort of, discuss all of this and get a little more in depth. Okay. Now, in the first video, we discussed the cut on Stephen's hand. In this link of different documents from the court trial, from the court case, there's some pictures, and I wanted to sort of go through a few of those things, but I'll do that at a later time. But the cut on the finger is really significant. And it is significant because that has been explained as where the blood in her car came from Steven Avery. And the thing is that if that cut was on his left hand and the blood was on the right side of the steering column, anybody else feel like they're suddenly in the middle of the fucking Twilight Zone? Because I don't know why he would jockey himself around in order for that blood to even get there. Some can say, oh, well, he probably had a little bit on his hands. Well, true. But, take a good look right there. You see all the lovely little wrinkles and whatnot in my hand, all the little veins? That would have produced a print of some kind. The human hand has many wrinkles and bends in it. Some kind of a print would have been found, but no prints of Steven Avery's were found at all. Because you can't really plant a print. I mean, you can. There's ways. I'm surprised the cops weren't aware of this, because I'm sure if they were aware of this, they would have done it. But another thing that I wanted to discuss with regards to that is this whole thing of, oh, well, there was Steven Avery's sweat on her trunk, on the latch to her trunk. How do you know it's his sweat is what I want to know. I want to see that report. I want to see that forensics report, that lab report that states that that source of the DNA was sweat. Because, folks, they had full access to Steven Avery's house for 8 days. 8 days. Guess what's in Steven Avery's house? His clothes, hairbrush, toothbrush. They had an endless, bottomless well of his DNA that they could have rubbed on shit. Okay? And DNA really can transfer like that. You take the toothbrush and rub it on the key. There you go. There's his DNA. You take a fork that was in the sink that he hadn't rinsed. Even if he had rinsed it, there's his DNA. Take his hairbrush, there's his DNA. You take some of his clothing, epithelial cells all over the fucking place. A lot of people are not really understanding this. And, it gets kind of irritating after a while, because I'm like, really? I have to come in and explain this shit? I'm a mom of 6. But clearly I do. I'm not trying to say that anybody is stupid. It's just I happen to have had an extensive education in criminal justice and the workings of the criminal justice system. And on top of that, forensic analysis. And I will happily sit down so that I can have a cigarette in peace for a minute and talk about something that I absolutely love, especially when it applies to other things. Pardon my off-brand soda. But as I was saying earlier, the memory does funky things. Back in the mid-'80s, all the way through the mid-'90s, there was this huge maelstrom of these recovered memory child abuse charges, sexual abuse charges filed against a shitload of parents. And that was what it was recovered memory. And these therapists were going through and practicing these new techniques. And as a result, these recovered memories came up. And later it turned out to be total bullshit. The information was being planted in the patient's heads by the therapist, either intentionally or inadvertently, one of the two. And here's the thing. Here's something interesting to know. Okay. Our memory does not play back like a DVD. All right. The myelin sheath on the brain cells has a lot to do with how you recall stuff. And depending on the age that you are at and the emotional trauma you sustained during a certain event will determine how you recall that event later in life. So say you're 3 years old and you're walking down the street with your parents, you know, first time walking outside of the stroller, just cruising along. And I don't know, Cocker Spaniel comes running out of a yard at you barking. You know, Cocker Spaniel does not make any physical contact with you, doesn't bite you, but you're 3. You know, think about the size ratio between a 3-year-old and a Cocker Spaniel, okay? Now, later, due to this event, you have developed an aversion to dogs, okay? You go to therapy, and your therapist says, well, you know, do you know what caused your fear of dogs? And you'll say, oh, yes, I remember exactly the event that it was. I was 3 years old, and I was walking down the street, and this giant pit bull comes bounding out of this yard and knocks me over and bites my arm. Now, the person isn't lying, okay? They actually remember that event as that. But then later, you know, the mom's like, that didn't happen. It was a Cocker Spaniel, and she came up barking because she didn't know who you were, but she never touched you. And you're going, no, Mom, no, I remember a pit bull, okay? The thing is that the patient isn't lying. The patient's brain, over the course of several years, has manufactured a memory to match with the emotional trauma. Okay, so the emotional trauma for a 3-year-old and that kind of event will be up to here. What actually happened, and an adult would interpret that stress level to be about here. But since the brain knows that the emotional memory is here, it will invent memories and fill in the gaps to match that emotional trauma to explain to you why that event was so traumatic. Okay? It's the same thing with Brendan Dassey. He has been fed these memories. And I think to a degree, it's not even so much a memory thing as he's just spitting back what he thinks they want to hear. And they keep hinting at him, well, what about the head, Brendan? What about the head? Something happened with her head. And he's like, I don't know. I cut off her hair. Something else with the head, Brendan. What else happened with the head? He punched her. Okay, what else with the head, Brendan? What happened with the head? Well, I slit her throat. What happened with the head, Brendan? Come on. What happened? Well, I strangled her. I'm just going to say it, Brendan. Who shot her? Who shot her in the head? You see? Sooner or later, when you are badgered that much, I don't care who you are or how smart you are. I don't care. You could be a fucking genius. And you get badgered like that for an extended length of time, sooner or later, you're just going to go, fine, fuck it, I did it. I was the second gunman on the grassy knoll. I'm 5 years old, but I was the second gunman on the grassy knoll. Because sooner or later, you snap. It's out of frustration. And I believe that was a lot of what was going on with Brendan. He just wanted to shut them up and get them out of his face. Now, we will discuss some other interesting points that I noticed in the very next video. Thank you for watching.